Hello everyone, how you guys doing? And welcome back to the official Nick Walsh TV channel. We're live once again, and it is an ultra rare Monday night stream. It's a pleasure to be back, guys. I hope you guys are doing well. We are testing out a new backdrop. We have shelving with appropriate poker-related stuff. We are still leaning stuff up against this wall because we are not sure how we're going to hang it yet, but that's a work in progress. And we're going to also test out some new lighting today as well, guys. So let me just turn this up and see if this works. I think this is too warm. I think that's way too warm, but it might balance a little bit. Or we can just go full Twitch and go for a... That's very twitchy. This 12-year-old neon blue is also a thing potentially, but there we go. I think this is a bit too bright. There we go. So yeah, aside from The Office coming along and looking a bit more Office-like, which is very nice, we are going to travel to Las Vegas on Friday of this week. And what does that mean? That means that we won't be streaming as much in general this week and for the 7 days that I'm gone. So we're going to try and put in some hours tonight. Also, I thought it might be fun to try and do a little evening stream. To see what the traffic is like, because we play during the day most of the time. So if you guys also couldn't tell already, we're also using a new mic stand, which lives on the desktop. You guys know that I have a nice mic arm, which I've always been a huge fan of, but I actually think this is starting to sound quite nice. And the room itself is sounding a lot less echoey. Obviously, if it's a lot closer, it'll pick up better anyway. So that's on the desktop. You guys let me know if the clicking and if the movement of the desk is actually causing damage to the audio quality. And we're going to fire up some games, and we're going to talk some smack, and we're going to try and win some pokers. Thank you everybody who joined on very, very late notice. In particular, I want to say a special thank you to our moderator, Tom. My streaming schedule has been a little bit unusual this year, and I do want to try and sneak in some more off-the-cuff streams. Tom always makes himself available whenever he can, and I really appreciate you jumping in last minute, buddy. That's very kind of you. Hello to everybody who joined us. Otherwise, hello Jakers, hello Akuma, hello Unmasked Streamer, good to see you, and hello Tony Warriors. Guys, thank you for coming last minute. Like I said, this is not my usual streaming time, but I was at the, is that the spa? I was at the health club. You might be able to tell from my hair and my general appearance, my general chilled wimp appearance. Good band, by the way. But yeah, let's go live. It's hot as hell right now, and there's no airflow in this room, but I'm hoping that we'll survive while my gaming PC actually heats up the room additionally. Let's take a look at the results so far this year. So if you guys have been following along, you'll know that this is a chip graph. Chip graphs are how we track our progress in Spin and Goes because they are the best indicator of long-term profitability, even more so than win rate, even more so than actual dollars won, because in the long run, if you have a solid chip EV, you can get to where you are supposed to go when it comes to Spin and Goes. Now, we know that Spin and Goes have changed significantly. The edge is significantly diminished. We are going to still continue to persevere with our 10K challenge despite conditions changing around us. We are going to try and play 10,000 Spin and Goes this year, which actually equates to something like $250,000 worth of games played. We are currently in the middle of a bit of a downswing, I want to call it. It's more of a sort of nothing period. If you are going through a stretch in Spin and Goes where you are not winning EV, very frequently, you will be going in a downswing in dollars as well, because you kind of have to run hot to win in spins in one way or another. At the moment, we've been kind of having this extended stretch of not much happening. We're not really winning chips the way we're supposed to. We're not really winning much of showdown. We don't really have the best hand that often. And obviously playing in games where we have more recreationals, we should theoretically be winning a little bit more. Which is what we're going to try and do this evening. So everyone says, you got to play the evening streams, right? You got to fire some evening games. We're going to try and do that today. We'll see what the traffic looks like. I have a sneaking suspicion we're going to encounter a lot of the same faces that we do when we're doing our daytime streams. I have played a little bit offline, as you guys will know. And also, we got some room to catch up here, guys. We're probably about 2,000 games behind our pace. Let's fire up our first game. We know both of these players right off the bat, by the way. You know, both of these geezers. And let's go to war, guys. Let's see how we get on tonight. I don't really know how long I intend on streaming. I don't think we're gonna do more than maybe 1 or 2 hours. Hello. We've got some dinner on the way as well. So we're just gonna play and see how we get on. See if we flop any boats. That would be kind of cool, right? Now, I think we can never miss the bet on the turn. If we were gonna bluff, it would look something like this. I don't know if this gets us close enough. This actually might be better. So 6, 7, 8. Yeah, this is better, isn't it? And when the hand runs like this, if he has a club, he's going to really struggle to fold. A lot of the hands that float this turn will contain clubs. So I guess we just kind of commit and hope for the best. Nine of clubs, jack of clubs, even 7 of clubs would be tricky to fold here. Our size on the turn should be a smidge bigger. In fact, probably just the full 2 is better, but there we go. He managed to get some chips anyway. And sorry, 3x multiplier. Let's go ahead and play this as a call. For fun says 10K spins a year. That's 15 days for me. I understand that, buddy. Yeah, when I decided I was going to do another spin and go challenge, anybody that's close to me will have heard the speech that I was giving. I was basically like, I really struggle to call this a challenge of any kind. Like, look, it's 10,000 games. It's a lot of spin and goes. Don't get me wrong, but if old Nick could hear if younger Nick could hear old Nick saying 10,000 was a challenge, he'd probably laugh. I think we can just bluff. Let's try that. I thought for a sweet second that we were in kickoff. I forgot that Spin and Go is updated for the World Cup. That's right. I mean, not officially World Cup associated, but obviously spin goal promotion is on. We have unlocked one of our spin goal targets. I should have actually given a speech about that already, guys. We are, of course, playing spins and we're unlocking spin goal targets. I think we've unlocked one of the bigger, the one that you need more numbers to unlock, basically. Smeeble, thank you very much, buddy. I'm at work for like almost 3 more hours. Okay, thanks, man. I'm glad I could help you out. Akuma says, why did the edge change? Is it the stack sizes? So you start with less chips and more spinning goes, and you also have shorter clocks. So the most frequent spinning goes we play are 2x and 3x multipliers. That's always been the case. However, in the latest merged player pool, the games start with 15 big blinds and the blinds go up about every 1 minute or so. It's slightly slower for 3x multipliers, but yeah, this has definitely got to be a call against the reg here. There is no chance that we're going to miss it against this player. In fact, this guy is almost definitely just going to get a reg tag before we move on to our next game here, because we've played with him enough now. Seems very solid. If we don't have any notes on him as of yet, that's usually an indication he's going to be a very reasonable player. We're going to call a shove if we need to here. Wish me luck. This one will be square textbook. We will mark it for review anyway, just in case, but the limp call with the 10-9 of diamonds is going to be really, really good, I think. You're not over the moon about it. It's not like you're trapping him with 10 high, but it's just a hand that is going to do very, very well. And part of the limp is mostly because we want to play a really pretty hand in position when they check, but if they jam, we don't want to give up that much equity at that stack depth. You could see, even against the high card, we had like 50% equity exactly, something like that. Hello, Florin. Good to see you, mates. So the King Deuce call was, the 10-9 is marked for review, and the King Deuce as well. We'll just double check that one. That was for 5.7. I would be very, very surprised if we got that one wrong. After all these years, that's probably at least 2 big blinds or so within a call. And we won our first game. That's nice. So what I need to do now, guys, is we've got lighting in this room. That's why you can see my face okay. Might even turn that up just a smidge now. We're here. 55, 80? 80 is a bit better. That's actually all right. What we need is a nice backlight. The overhead lights are no good. They're not nice at all. All right, Jags. I'm pretty sure we've played, oh, maybe not this player specifically. Folding to a min ISO is pretty pathetic, to be honest, and you know, there's a chance we probably still have to call there, but it's like in the 2x multi, I think I'd rather fold and move on. If we're gonna enter pots with that wide of a hand anyway, it's like, okay. How is the audio sounding, everybody? It's not a fancy mic stand, don't get me wrong, but it's got really thick, like somewhat smushy rubber isolation feet, and I think that that's going to make a big difference to like the vibration. If it's going to sit on my actual desktop that moves, I think there's a chance that the vibrations would have become an issue if I hadn't bought something like this. But I think I did some testing. I preferred the sound of the mic being just a little bit closer to my face, and also the mic doesn't have to adjust the gain as much to try and catch my voice from further away. So look, against El Mejor, I think we're just gonna call here. It's like this is a call at like 10-ish big blind, something like that. So I think we need to stick to the rules against the reg here. All of the investigation that I've done thus far on reg tendencies indicate that they're shoving the correct ranges in these spots, as you would expect, right? We have noted a couple spots where we are going to deviate specifically against regs, or where the regs seem to unanimously deviate themselves. That could be pool strategy or something like that. But in general, I'm happy to, you know, I've already done the homework to take those spots and not feel bad about it, and to feel confident that we are going to, feel confident that we are not over or under adjusting in those situations. A couple weeks ago, sat down, did a database review, and you know, a lot of the most common blind v blind or heads up jam spots are pretty much as you'd expect from most regs. Couple really interesting deviation spots though. If I pull out my little text document here, let's give myself a little review on what we're going to try and do. So that one's pretty straightforward. We are going to do that more often. That's a really cool one. That's a good one as well. Right, I forgot about that one. Cool, yeah, so we're going to actually increase our min-raise range here from the button multi-way. Right, okay. Akuma says, sounds good to me. Nice. I know it's a funny question, because if you guys aren't streamers, it can be difficult to know what you're trying to listen out for. The music should be playing. That covers a lot of sins. Speaking of which, I'm going to actually address the music thing as well shortly. Nice. I think we're probably fine to just flat aces here. This is pretty unconventional. This is probably somewhat unbalanced, but also when we have these min-raise ranges as well, in these situations from these players, I think it's really important that we include some traps as calls. Hello, Cool Hand Matt. Speaking of spin crushers, it's good to have you here, mate. But yeah, we're just gonna have a chilled one. We're just gonna fire a few games, get a couple spins under our belts, and then we are going to just call it when we're ready to call it. We're not going to push too hard this evening. I appreciate one tabling on stream should never be considered quote unquote pushing it. under any circumstances. But what I mean to say is I just wanted to put in a few hours and just have a light one this evening, not get too into it. And tomorrow we'll just do a normal stream at the normal time as expected. In the run up to Vegas, because we're going to Vegas on Friday, if you guys missed that, just going to make sure I do all the packing and stuff, make sure we got everything ready. We can definitely fold this one against the 2 players. Feel good about that. We probably are very close to a mandatory call against the initial jam. I'd imagine it's probably not even close to that stack depth, but you never know. Some players are very, very snug in these games. So 2x multiplier, unknown player. Let's go ahead and limp a little bit more than we would. Betting this flop seems very fine. I think checking is probably also very cool. And then I think on the turn, it's a very obvious bet to just protect our equity. Our opponent isn't going to have a 10 of 4 or a 6 here too often. The min check raise, I have to say, is very, very, very strong from unknown players. On that basis, we can definitely get away here. Look, we're not going to fold to a min check raise on every turn, but if this becomes a frequent thing, we'll spot it very quickly. We'll throw in a trap here at 4 big blinds effective. We can definitely do a little bit of everything here. I'd say betting is fine. Checking is going to be okay against the unknown player. Same again. Now, our opponent should very rarely have an ace or a king on this river. Given the pre-flop action here, we can definitely consider still value betting. You're not going to get called by a bunch, but your opponent just won't have much anyway. Hello to Martin Ricketts, by the way, on YouTube. Good to see you there, buddy. Yeah, we're just playing the 1 table. For the most part, on stream, we do 1 table, sometimes 2. For the sake of the content, right? We're not trying to go max full grind mode. Because we are maybe 2,000 games behind our target or our pace this year to try and get to 10K games, it might be that we do a couple days of 4 tabling, which will catch us up very, very rapidly. Like, you know. There's definitely a good argument for us to put in a couple days like that for sure. Okay, so no bet on the flop. It's an interesting spot now. I definitely think betting the turn is going to be fine. I actually wouldn't mind checking again and seeing what we can do here. Once we hit that queen, we're now obviously beating some other queen X. I would anticipate our opponent to probably not have a hand as good as a queen. King high, ace high, maybe. I think this is probably just a min bet spot now. For Fun says, what's your chip EV out of the 25 so far? We're at like 7 right now, buddy. We've been stuck in a bit of a rut for some time. For some reason, this year in particular, I'm just not winning anything at Showdown. I mean, I think probably as a result of the fact that we are being more aggressive in red line, we are bluffing more, and when we get caught, obviously it's costing us blue line. But just the consistency of the cold decks that we've encountered, or like the consistency of like the negative free roll situation we've been in against other players, has been very difficult to get that anything above. Like, I think at one point we were at 9.5 or something like that, which I appreciate is very, very low. But that's just where we're at right now. We're just not doing very well in general in the chip EV department. However, with the frequency and the pace that we've sort of been getting cooler, you know, if we get the opposite treatment even for a short run, the fact that we're actually playing the rest of the game very well, I think we'll get up to at least 15 or higher. If we don't get to something in the region of, I don't want to undersell it. I mean, I don't want to be unrealistic, because, you know, I always want to try and be as honest with you guys as possible. If we don't get to 16 or above by the end of the year, I'll be very disappointed, because I believe that we should be somewhere closer to 18 or higher. Now, What is actually possible these days, I don't know for certain, but I do know that that is actually very, very high. Having said that, because a lot of what I do here on Twitch is creating content and I tend to play during the days, what is actually going to be achievable if the majority of the volume that I play is during the day against two regs is very, it shouldn't be anywhere near that, right? I actually should legitimately be winning very little against two regs in most games. Martin says it would be good to see your mental process side of four tabling. Show us we're all human. I mean, if anything, you know, I actually probably feel sort of less frustrated when I play more tables, just because it's like there's less time to sort of get upset about like the stupid encounters that seem to happen. Having said that, you know, if you four table for a little while and you just feel like you're always running into it like we have recently, it's like, I don't know. I would definitely be up for that though. Hello, Zafine, good to see you. Welcome back, mate. Now, this is an interesting one against the reg, and we want to be very, very careful with these ones now. Looks like missing that 20-minute stream broke my 63 stream watch. That is really annoying. I'm sorry to hear that. For Fun says the 7 chip EV is very rough, but 25s is pretty reg heavy, and the games don't even start sometimes at daytime anymore. I mean, I've definitely never encountered a situation where the games weren't starting, but when the games are starting and it's 2 regs for 3 hours straight, like I know people that you know have seen some of the big data behind, you know, what's possible, and like I think in their estimation, I was talking to a guy who, you know, is a spinning go coach. He worked out that something like I don't want to misquote, but like you get the idea. Like basically, he had worked out that the average his average student playing against 2 average regs was making like 1 or 2 chips per game, which is like not at all shocking, and perhaps it's a good sign that we have a 7 chip EV when the majority of the games that we've played have been against mostly regs, but like who knows? There's so much variance, like there's so much volatility in the new format as well. It's very, very difficult to tell. And you know, I'd like to think that after 10,000 games, I can look at my results and feel like pretty good about it. But there's always a lot of considerations, you know. 7 chip EV makes me feel so sad though, because like for Funs, you of all people know that I put a lot of stock into just like trying to do the right thing and trying to play for EV and like sticking to the plan and trying to, you know, stick to my guns, follow the process, trust the process. That's the phrase I'm looking for, right? We're going to do a very rare raise here, guys. It's going to be just 2.5 though. I really like to trust the process, and I think this guy's been shoving a lot versus limps, right? Yeah, we can do this instead. This works. Great trap, Nick. Just quads. Just quads. Anyway, you know, I'm somebody that wants to follow the process, but when I'm stuck in like EV hell, where I'm just not winning anything at Showdown, and I'm not gaining any EV, it's like it's tough. It's tough. It's been a pretty rough couple. I say couple months, but you guys know I'm not streaming every day. I'm not playing 1,000 games a day. So if it was young Nick speaking, young Nick would have just sat and fired up more tables and just gone straight through it, blasted straight through the middle. Yeah, Cool Hand Matt, if you guys missed it, Cool Hand Matt posted out a big win that he had recently on spins. He had a 1000x, I believe it was, and 1000x banger. Jackpot spin, managed to cash it all into my bankroll now as well. That's fantastic, mate. So this guy seems pretty aggro. I'm going to assume that King 5 is going to be fine here. You know, if he turns up with Queen 8 of spades, you know, we're going to assume that he's going to be somewhat versed on push fold. Like he's aware of the fact he's not just waiting for an ace or a king or whatever. So patience pays off there. Good call in the end. And this one's just going to be too loose for me, for my taste right now against this player. Going to sneak in another trap here at 8 big blinds effective. This guy, I think we could probably safely say that this guy has attacked, you know, a more than normal amount of our limps. If he has a 7 or hearts here, we're going to get it all if we bet flop. So let's just do that. He is almost never going to have an ace in that spot. Or an overpair, so we're good to fire away. Now, this one's really close. Against the player that is shoving very aggressively versus our limps, we're going to take the Nash push. 10-7 off is going to be a 9 big blind jam for a break-even push fold. I don't know why I always remember that one specifically, but that one always sticks in my brain. We end up having 2 live cards against Ace-King, so we don't lose too much EV, but again, this is symptomatic of what we've been dealing with for the last couple months here. A lot of very standard, very reasonable poker and running into the top of people's ranges, just demolishing our EV. You know, the 10-7 jam there merits a lot of folds for 7 big blinds, excuse me. But part of that equation is kind of the same, right? So actually in this particular spot, having 2 live cards against Ace-King is not the end of the world for the EV. We're not losing all that much in actual dollars when we find ourselves in that particular spot. So there you are. Yeah, congratulations, Cool Hand Matt. Very pleased for you, buddy. Cool Hand Matt's been a long time supporter of my content, and yeah, it's very, very nice to see one of the good guys win. As we get shallower, the hands like this are going to have enough equity to call, so we're just going to take the EV. Even against Queen 6 of Spades, you guys can see we're actually still doing pretty well there. Can we take this one down? Nice. Not bad. So what I think we need is some backlighting on this. We need something that illuminates this back wall, because it's a bit too dark in the background, but the actual lighting is okay. My skin tone is not too warm, not too cool. During the day, we've got the natural light from the window, which is quite nice too. Actually, that somebody commented when we had the freshly painted white walls, it looks like I was playing poker in heaven, which I thought was nice. There's a new chair coming as well, guys, so I will be sitting in a more appropriate position. We went all out on the chair purchase, guys. We spent a couple bucks on something fancy, and it's gonna be plush. Although now on a day like today, I'm a bit concerned that the fabric was a terrible, terrible choice. So this guy on the right, by the way, guys, we've played at least like 100 hands with him before, so I'm not 100% convinced that this guy is the recreational that we've been looking for when we're playing in these pools right now in the evening. So far, if we assume this guy is some kind of a regular spin and go player, not seeing too many randos. So, I mean, if we were going to start betting, I guess this would be a good time to do so. We could get check raised on a board like this, I suppose. Okay, let's take a card. Let's see. Does this strike you as a bluff, chat? This does not strike me as a bluff. And we're just gonna vibe code that one. We are just gonna vibe code that one. You guys like my new all-in button, by the way? It's not as fancy as the boombox. I'm gonna bring the boombox back in some capacity, but for the time being, we've just got the clicky all-in button on the mouse. I just got me a DX Racer gaming chair, Ram Ranch. I actually had one of those bad boys back in the day. Here are my feelings about it. I feel like I may have outgrown the aesthetic, but that's not meant to be an insult to your tastes. I actually think they have a specific look, and I think they're pretty cool chairs. They're definitely giving gaming vibes. They're definitely giving Twitch gaming vibes, right? I would say good chair. I was with it for a long time, but as I've gotten older, my back and my neck are just shot to pieces, and I need something with a little bit more flair, a little bit more pick me up, a little bit more support, and perhaps something a little bit less gamer in, a little bit more refined office, if that makes sense. Yeah. Okay. Cool. We're gonna give a little comment like this, and we're going to ask the question: shoving Nash X2. We're gonna do this, and we're gonna proceed from there. Sounds like Dick's chair is a lot fancier than that. I'm imagining a throne. So, if you guys have ever heard of the chair, it's called the company is called Human Scale, and they're known for doing like pretty fancy office furniture. I'm going for a 10x multiplier. Cool. Nice little 10x opportunity. I'm going for a 10x multiplier, and we're gonna go for a freedom, but we've got a couple customizations. We're going for a slightly more expensive fabric. It's got a much wider sort of foot base. It's got the ring around the bottom. It's got the extended height, but I'm expecting great things. My Herman Miller that I'm rocking right now is pretty, but it's actually not the one. It's not what we're looking for. Hello, Pokeball. It's good to see you. And he has things in the background. I know. It's like a real poker thing. Oh, that's such a good turn. This guy is gonna rep that 7 so hard, you guys. We have the 7 of hearts as well. This is a joyous occasion. This is a joyous occasion. So, raising is a thing. Are we being stupid by raising? I mean, the thing is, he's going to be bluffing here so often. We're not going to get called by worse. The 7-8 is, I know it's going to be rare, but trust me when I tell you that this is going to be a bluff so often, especially with the aggression that we've seen from this guy so far. He's not going to call with 2 pair. He's not going to call with the bottom end of the straight. So we're just going to cook ourselves. This guy clearly has played some cards. Okay, interesting. I am tempted to check that turn. I would say there's a fair amount of EV in this move. Once we hit the 9, we don't need to continue bluffing. Our opponent will have missed clubs. Our opponent might just have a 7 or a deuce once in a while. They won't have the queen that much. I'd say the actual made clubs just bet flop after a check quite frequently. So let's check in and reassess, because it's not unreasonable to assume that they are going to bluff if they have 1 missed club. They would usually always check with a 7, however, which I'm assuming is where we're at right now if he's checking. He has ace high with the ace of clubs, so that's also very reasonable. A combination that is going to... a combination that is going to get to showdown with ace high and be best hand often. Very good, to be honest. So betting here, probably good. Checking here, probably also totally fine. Let's take a check. We're playing the 10x multi. Let's slow it down a smidge. Same again. 5s have showdown plus spades. We're not going to get a queen or a 7 to fold at this point. I think we would have struggled to get a queen, a 7, or an ace or a king to fold at any point. So once we get to the river, check, check. Lovely stuff. eTurn17 says, I lose so much EV from Redline. Any practical advice on this leak? I know I should be bluffing more, but that's too general. So honestly, mate, it's very difficult to know because it can mean so many different things. For a long time, I didn't have any kind of flat or winning Redline. But I also won a lot from Blue Line, sort of. So it was kind of a style thing in some senses. As I played more, I realized that having a better red line was a more consistent way of earning chips and spinning goes because you're not relying on Showdown to get you there. Honestly, the best thing you can do, eTurn, is track all of your poker results into a proper tracker like Hanson Note or Poker Tracker, whatever. Compare your frequencies to solid EV, solid GTO frequencies, and you'll usually find the leak very rapidly from there. Now, I appreciate that's not the easiest ask, but that's kind of the best way to do it. And then study those spots and realize how much you're missing, and just drill those spots in something like GTO Wizard. I think is good. Raising defo seems like a good thing. Of course, it feels good to raise with that hand, but I'm vibe coding this right now. This is a straight vibe code. Now, in this particular setup, I'm going to sneak in a rare min raise into this shorty in the 10x multiplier. I think this looks exceedingly strong, but in addition to that, the player in the big blind is even less incentivized to gamble the big blind there when he will win nothing for third place, and therefore this feels good. So 14 big blinds. Let's take a flop with the suited ace. We do manage to hit a 6. The 3-bet jam with the a6 of spades here I think would have been fine, but I think this is preferred, and we're not going to fold just yet. Bit of a tough one, to be honest, in this setup. You know what? Vibe coding today. Vibe coding. Hello, Solander. Thank you for the good lucks. Thanks for joining today, mate. Really appreciate that. Poker Bras. Yellow means reg. This means maybe reg. Moors is 100% reg at this point. Moors makes my life very, very difficult. How you doing today, Cylinder? We're playing a 10x, by the way, buddy. Look at this. 250 bucks. 250 of the biggest bucks in the world. We should never underestimate the potential stupidity of our opponents. I mean, look, no, I am 100% with you on that front. However, once we get them into aggressive reg territory, now we have to be more discerning than that. If it's random blue tag psycho, never miss the spot. Never ever. But I'm with you on that. There's just a time and a place. Hey Zintex, how we going today, buddy? So this is definitely just going to be a jam. I'm hoping he's not going to wake up with the top of his range like we've been experiencing for the last 3 months. Oh my god. That is not a bad thing. Getting a fold there is pretty cool. Sorry, eTurn, I know that's not the most helpful advice, and I know you're looking for something a bit more useful. I guess the only thing I could say is you're probably not raising enough versus limp. You're probably overfolding versus steals. You're probably overfolding to c-bets, and you're probably massively overfolding to turn c-bets as well. Let's try and put a little steal in here. Okay. So we arrive on this board. Double gut shot. You think we could have just got the double gutter ball once in a while, right, guys? That would have been nice. Yeah. Yeah, I know, bro. I know, bros. I know you know, bros. So annoying. We have live cards and we have the double gut shot and we brick both. Like, come on. Give him the 6. Give him the 6, man. That's what we're looking for right there. Give him the pair. This is the problem, guys. This has been our issue this year. Lots and lots of very cute little spots like that. We've managed to sort of finagle our way into some pretty reasonable situations. And we're just not getting enough showdown to make it work. So we're going to play this one nice and balanced. We're going to start with the one big blind on queen, king, queen, deuce. Martin Ricketts says, do you save your rake back over the year or do you invest straight into your bankroll? It totally depends. Because I'm a PokerStars ambassador, I still, of course, play poker for profit. I still intend on playing poker to make a profit by the end of the year. But because I have an income from my ambassadorship and from my commentary and stuff like that, there's less of a strategy regarding, you know, the reinvestment of funds for poker. Baby, wanna hold? Oh my God, we are chopping in the 10x multiplier. Thank you so much, babe. That looks beautiful. Help me, It's burning my fingers. Okay, guys, that was a 70-30 perfect spot for us, and that was in the 10x multiplier, and we ended up getting a chop. Not ideal. Not at all ideal. Sorry, Martin, I was saying, so if I were to be doing a bankroll challenge where I was trying to build a bankroll, I would always reinvest. In fact, that would make perfect sense, right? Because if we get decent rake back, thank you so much, baby. If we get decent rake back, you know, that linear unlocking of money can be a great way to inspire the bankroll and increase the bankroll over time. In the event that I was happy playing the stakes I was playing and I was playing considerable volume, it might even be a strategy. This is a strategy that I have absolutely employed before. I will play and play and play and play my heart out. And then what we will do is only withdraw the rake back as we unlock it, right? So there was a time when I was playing cash games in decent volume. And at the end of each month, rather than withdrawing cash from the bankroll itself, I would withdraw rake back directly. I'm going to take this spot here. All right, so we're heads up for the 10x multi anyway, guys. I'd say this is probably going to be a pretty close one. The shove is definitely going to be fine here against the very aggressive heads up player. Maybe we just default to this one. Hey, Rick Dolph, what's up, buddy? Good to see you. So the 5-4 here, we can raise some of the time. We're not going to do it this time. 5-4, 6, 7. Okay, so we are definitely in check raise territory. I would anticipate my opponent to bet this flop at pretty much 100% frequency anyway. I think this is very, very reasonable stuff. It's difficult for us to represent an ace on this texture. However, it is very reasonable for us to check raise where our opponent will have way too many continuation bets. And now there is a bit of a question mark. There's a bit of a question mark. I'd say we probably have to give up at this point. Fair enough. The bet call with King 9 of Diamonds is very good. Definitely sign off on this move. Ace 5, pretty straightforward jam. A lot cheaper than Nick's office chair, that's right. Okay. So ace tray, very clean push. 7 big blinds directly into 5s. Can we get lucky? That would be really nice. 10. We had it all in 70-30 for the big pot, guys. Just out of curiosity, let's go ahead and mark that 5-6 hand. I'd be very surprised if we've made any big mistakes there. Once we get to showdown, I think our opponents absolutely will have high cards and stuff like that, but I'd say we kind of need to follow the rules. It's fine for us to be an aggressive check raiser on that texture. There's actually some much better turns for us to barrel. I think the 8 I don't think is a particularly good one because what we're trying to tell our opponent there is we have 8-6 maybe an 8 ace-8 suited, maybe a 6 ace-6 suited. Technically, some of the times those will be checked back. I'd say vast majority we're going to raise those, obviously. But overall, the check raise, I think, is appropriate, because otherwise we're not going to miss our check raise frequency correctly. We're not going to be hitting our target frequency. The paired board is, I would say, another example of how we're probably playing hands very well, but we're not running into the situations, or we're not coming into the situations where we can still continue to profit. So if this turn comes another gut shot, for example, if the board pairs with a 6, for example, that's probably better than an 8. If it comes a complete brick, like let's say, well, a deuce isn't a brick, a deuce is another gut shot, right? If the board comes maybe a 10, 10 is an interesting prospect, because obviously we can check raise with hands like with 9-7 and stuff like that too. I'm not sure. What we'll do is we'll mark it for review and we'll take a look. That's the only hand that I'm going to be interested to review from that session. We need to update our tracking. We're tracking not only all of our profit and loss, but we're also tracking our big multipliers. So we came second in this case. We still managed to win 50 bucks. So we still make a little bit here. But Martin Sam, what's up? 10x multiplier, and you know, honestly, we could have just won our all-in and been in a much better position and had some more ammunition to battle, but I would say that was a very clean game from us. I would argue that was very clean. The Queen Jack is an interesting one as well. The Queen Jack is obviously going to be a profitable shove. We were at 11 or 12. Let's just mark that one for review too. I want to see how close that one gets, because I'm happy to make that adjustment against a specific player type. Etern says, well, actually, what does he say? One sec, let's play this hand first. Etern says, 15 big blinds heads up. I see GTO limping ace-8, ace-7, ace-9. Should I be jamming instead if villain doesn't ISO enough? Yes and no. So the offsuit varieties may actually end up playing better as jams if your opponent doesn't ISO enough. That is quite a common adjustment if you node lock. However, the suited ace-8, the suited ace-7, the suited ace-9, they have such good playability in position. Very often you're going to want to limp those or continue to have those as limps. A lot of the value of limping a hand like ace-8 is because you want to call when they jam king deuce off, ace deuce off, ace 3 off, all the hands, some of the hands that we have dominated in those situations. I think we'll just have one bet on the flop against the unknown player. We don't pick up any equity. Let's just slow it down now. By the way, claps in the chat for Ruthie. Ruthie! Ruthie! Sorry, we were in the middle of a 10x. Thank you, darling.
You're welcome.
Thank you for cooking.
Chicken's really good.
It looks delicious. I'm going to try to not put my audience through the sloppy.
ASMR.
El mejor. Reg v reg, pretty straightforward. I'm just going to mute for a sec, guys, while I have a little bite. Hot damn, that's good. That was very, very good.
Does he ever lose? This guy. Does he ever lose?
Thank you very much to Rosla and E-Turn for the follows. Spingo 3 Max as well. That was 4 days ago, though. I'm spilling all over the new setup chat. It's not good. It's okay. No harm, no foul. We do, Richtolf. We absolutely do. It's kind of like a chicken tikka, Indian-inspired rice bowl situation with a little bit of Greek yogurt, salad situation. Nice. Not bad. Okay. U-Turn says, and for ace 10 off and ace jack off, would you also jam or open heads up against a passive opponent? You can mix. What you'll find is if you look at the actual EV of a min raise versus a limp with those hands, they might be quite similar. But remember, if you do look them up and you look at what the expected value is of each line, that will be in the expectation that your opponent will respond correctly as well. So it's kind of better if you want to take a look at some of those. We could do some node locking, for example, to compare the EV of, versus a passive opponent or whatever. Generally speaking, if your opponents are extremely passive, you just want to be putting more money in with those. So a min raise might be better. You are removing the opportunity to cold deck your opponent when you don't limp. So there is some lost EV. Generally speaking, I think it's agreed among regs, though. If you're playing in a field or against players that are particularly passive, then min raising more is going to be a better strategy. The one thing I would say about those hands specifically is ace 10 off has much better playability than a hand like ace 7 or ace 8. And therefore, if you are going to keep some of your ace X combos in a limp trap, obviously the those ones are going to perform much better. So if you wanted to simplify your strategy, you might just turn some of your weaker ace combos into steals. But having said that, because they don't play as well, if you min raise ace 7 and you get called often, they can be more tricky to play from in position. And you need to be conscious. This is very important. You need to be conscious of the fact that if you start to implement unbalanced strategies where you're doing more min raising than you're supposed to, quite often you're going to have to look at the post flop as well. So if you're going to min raise lots of your weak and gappy offsuit aces, you do need to check the flop a lot more often than you were when you were playing more of a balanced strategy. I would say that under 15 big blinds effective, one of the biggest leaks that I started to plug was I was massively over c-betting, which is a good strategy against most players. But when you start to play against very competent short stacked players, like in spin and goes at 25s plus, they're going to check raise you. They're going to put you in tough spots. They're going to float. And if you don't have an answer on the turn, it can be very difficult to know what to do. I would say that more so than in 25 big blind spinning goes, having a very specific plan on the flop of what you want to try and accomplish or what you're going to do can be a very big thing. Like when you're 25 big blinds deep and you start the hand that way, there's so much that you can do. You can, size up different streets. The way when the hand develops, you have so much more to like overbet jam if you want to sort of bluff, or if you're ever going for value in specific situations. Obviously, when you're 15 big blinds deep and you start with a min raise, you're down to 13, then you put in a normal c-bet, then you're down to 12. All of a sudden, you kind of got to have a plan in mind for turns and rivers. It's very, very, very tricky indeed. Hello, Lawler. Good to see you, mate. I'm just eating, so I'm kind of trying to mute. Matt, I would say that this is a one-off for now. I like the idea of just having a couple more common evening streams that are just off the cuff, like not announced. I'll let you guys know when we go live, obviously, but I mean like not like a regular thing. I'd say in general, I like the idea of having. There's different like parts of the day where I feel really motivated. I would say like early afternoon, I feel pretty good about like doing stuff that I want to do. But then also there's kind of this chill evening energy. Like tonight, you might notice we're not running particularly good, but I feel very relaxed. I mean, we just came back from the health club. Had to read, chilled out. I am feeling particularly chill, especially given the fact that we're not, really running particularly good to this evening, which is feeling nice as well. So I might just try and do a couple more evening ones here and there. Excuse me. I think that makes sense. U-turn says ace 10, ace jack off, jamming, then 15 big blinds is overkill. I don't think you want to jam them. If you're at 15 effective, you definitely want to try and get way more value than that. I would say keep ace 10, ace jack off as traps, and then potentially at 15, if you're heads up, if we're talking about heads up, you could probably just jam a lot of your offsuit aces that were lower than that. That would probably be totally cool. All right, good luck, Ram Ranch. Hey, spins or spins, buddy. Spin it up. We'll see, though. We'll see how it evolves. It also depends how hot it is. I'm actually really, really warm in this room today, but that's just because it's particularly hot in the south of England right now. Okay, we're going to raise. We're going to do one of these. We're folding to a shove. And the 6-4 can come out now against the reg. Also, if you hadn't seen it already, talking to E-turn now. Maybe you already have them, but don't forget about this as well. This is a really good tool. The best thing, in my opinion, the best thing about those charts is number one. Did he have kings? Number one, those charts are, in my opinion, the superior in terms of the preflop sizings used at different stack depths. They were built completely by myself. Hand built those myself using simple preflop. I do think that they have slightly better sizings in certain situations than GTO Wizard. I think GTO Wizard is also fantastic. Don't get me wrong. But if you have not seen those yet, one of the best things about them is they are one shot purchase. Once you have access for life, and it's not something that you have to it's not something that you have to re-up if you want to continue to study, and it's nice just to know that that's on your hard drive. So for example, in this spot against the reg and the 2x multiplier, I think this is probably a fine way to behave heads up. Now this is the kind of player that may pounce on the limps more aggressively, so this is maybe a misstep, but in the 2x multiplier in particular, we're not going to have as much time to play and make some of the more difficult ones work for us all the time. I think Sir Nicholas Walsh said 200 binds recommended for binds. Is that true for 50 cents? The higher your chip EV, the less buffer you need, but also in the new version, anything can happen. So yeah, nice one, Matt. I appreciate that, dude. It depends what you're trying to accomplish as well. Like, I think it's totally fine for people to just deposit when they want to play, but you have more fun playing poker when you have a goal in mind, and it's difficult to keep track of that goal if you keep depositing, withdrawing. Like, keeping your bankroll separate from your life money, your poker bankroll from your life money, I think is always kind of a good idea. Love This Crazy Life says, I love spins before they change the blind structure. I definitely miss them myself, mate. You know how I feel. You guys know how I feel about these. Let's just take the flop here with the 10-9. Gonna get really sticky on the ace-9 queen board. Our opponent should be attacking this, like, you know, two-barrel bluffing on this board very frequently. And I'm hoping that we improve so we can just call down nice and easy. But if he bets flop and he bets turn, you know, it's going to be pretty hard for us to fold. I think that checking here is going to be fine. I think the bet is going to be way better. JP Marshmallow says, hi, Nick. Somebody sleep in today. Not your typical stream time. It is not. No, we're doing a one-off Monday night stream. I might try and do more in the future. I might try and do more in the future. You know, checking on that river, I just don't feel like your opponent's going to want to bluff that much. It just feels like you have a hand way too often. Betting more than one seems like it's very difficult for us to have many strong hands. If we don't use a little size there. Downloaded the chart pack on your work computer. I love that. We are going to play this as a check flop. We are supposed to check some of our top pairs, often the ones that have weak kickers, and indeed some of the ones that end up having some straight draws, backdoor straight draws as well. That's a really, really rough run out for us. Pretty rough. We have underrepresented our hand in a way where our opponents can have lots of bluffs. I would argue that pretty much any spade, especially like the 8 of spades or the 6 of spades, are very good candidates to do this with. On that basis, yeah, very nice. I'm not surprised that he turns up having a good hand here, of course, but I think part of the reason why we are playing our hand in this fashion is to try and inspire some bluffs. There are so many natural bluffs there. Just any random spade is going to be good enough to do it. If you had a bum straight draw, the 8 of spades is a great combination that you might play there too. You lead the turn with this sort of straight draw, whatever combo. The only downside to that spot specifically, I would say, is on the ace high, when we check flop and it comes ace high, our opponents tend to bluff a little bit less. Having said that, this isn't just any opponent. This guy plays a lot of spin and goes. I've got like 1,000 hands plus with this guy. It's an interesting run out. It can look and feel a little bit spewy in this particular setup that we just saw. 8 of spades, 10 of spades, 6 of spades is actually a really good one as well, I think. A10, 10 is definitely obviously a component here, of course. The 10 is the straight, but it is a tricky one. We'll look at this one for review. I'm not going to say that this one is a cert for GTO, but I would be interested to see 5, 6, 7, 8. We're blocking the bottom end of the straight. That could actually bluff turn, value bet river. That's probably not a huge component, but let's just mark that one for review, just out of interest. We'll do some study as well. Yeah. The thing is, I kind of respect this guy too much. And when we check this flop, what we're saying is that we might have a 9, we might have a 7. Sometimes we have a high card. This is the kind of spot, though. This is the kind of run out where when we check the flop, we will end up having some king high, ace high combos. So we make top pair here. If we do have the ace, though, this is a really good run out for you to continue with your bluff, right? If you're turning 6, 8 of spades, 6, 8 of spades into a bluff here, feels really good. You're so glad I didn't pay attention to that run out. Oh, I didn't even see that. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Braz, you've been watching a couple streams recently. We've been. Yeah, Hello, Cow Chad. Just nonchalantly munching. I didn't see it. I didn't see it, and nothing surprised me at this point. We've had a pretty gross year. I'm not going to try and get excited about it anymore. You see, this is what we've. This is why the evening streams actually have a little bit more interest to me. I almost definitely feel more passive, not passive in terms of poker, but more chill in the evening. What's the max amount of tables you guys would run at once? I think my max has always been around 4. I mean, it took me ages to get there as well. I was never some mass table genius like my friends. %100% call, 30% equity. 2026 in a nutshell right there. 100% shove, 70% equity. 100% call, 20% equity. JP is asking if I'm heading to Vegas. I am headed to Vegas this year. I'll be heading there on Friday, in fact. I don't know what the plan is at the moment. I'm traveling with the Hippodrome team. I'm definitely going to play a lot of cash. I really enjoy playing cash, especially during the series. And I think the idea or the plan is to just see how we go. My family is coming to visit, so I'm not going to have as much free time to play tournaments as I'd like. My family will be visiting, and I haven't seen them for a long time. I've got some family coming from Wisconsin, some family coming from Philadelphia. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I'm just going to see how we go, see how we get on. I'm thinking about doing some Instagram content, just keeping track of my cash game profitability throughout the trip. Yeah, we're still waiting on the 100x Tom. We did have that 10x today. We did have that 10x, but we got robbed in the 10x a little bit though, unfortunately. We did get kind of robbed in the 10x multi. This is 100% a call, blind be blind. If we see a jam. Thank you for the good luck, Marshmallow. Good to have you here. Sadie into the main. I'm not going to be around for the main, I think. I'm coming back on the 4th of July, which is a sad day to leave the United States, if you guys are aware of the significance. I've had kings 3 times in this game. 3 times, not bad. Okay. I think we got action once, and that's because he was all in. That could be a sign, guys. We could be headed to for some great things here. Waller says, I think I'll play a fair bit of cash this trip. Nice. You know, my friend Poker Bras took me to Orleans to play. Took me to Orleans to play. Took me to Orleans to play. I'm going to bet the turn. Fixed limit Omaha 08s. Omaha 8s or better. And it was fun, and I don't play mixed games, but the game was so soft, I kind of feel obliged to go back and give it another go and just see if I can guess my way through another winning session $1 at a time. Oh, Tom missed the 10x. Fair enough. It was some time ago, bud. It was a good game from us. We played well. Cool. So we did make that cute little move there with the 8-6. I am very interested to see. I'm assuming that GTO is not going to agree with my line in the slightest. But I would like to investigate how GTO plays that hand in general. Leave the US on Independence Day, exactly. What's up, JT Dex? You hope all's well. All's well. I hope the Allins are well too. Well, dinner was very nice. Well done, Ruthie. The new office is pretty plush, guys, I gotta say. The new office is pretty plush. Yeah, Bras insisted that I go play Fixed Limit Omaha 8. And it was funny. Yeah, you mentioned Lawler. I wouldn't go sit and play a tournament of that. I want to be able to get out when I want to get out. Was it full kill? I forgot all about that. I forgot what that rule even means. Kill everyone. Lots of bonuses with steel wheels and bad beat jackpots and such. I remember after Braz left that session. After Braz left that session, I continued to play for a little bit longer, and I ended up in this ridiculous four-way pot. Got the nuts. I've got ace deuce, which was the nuts, and I've got the nuts. Sorry. I have ace deuce and I have the actual nuts. And thank you for the follows, guys. Graves, Razla, Smigu. That's a nice name. That's a nice name. Thank you. I had the nuts and I had ace deuce, which was the nut low. And I got it whatever all in. I don't know if you can call it all in. We got tons of chips in going to the river, where it was like pot. And like all four of us had ace deuce. And then like three dudes just completely forgot that they need to have a high hand altogether. Just like absolutely ridiculous nonsense hands. Just a bunch of guys that think because they have ace deuce, they have the nuts. And like the board rivers and gives like two guys boats. And like one guy, I don't know. I can't remember the hand, but you get where I'm going with this. It was like, I was trying to figure out what exactly, like I was trying to figure out how I messed it up, because I was absolutely positive that like I had missed a rule or something, because like I didn't understand why everyone was getting all their chips in the middle. And I end up getting quartered or whatever it's called, because one guy had ace deuce with two pair on like a 3 club board or whatever it was. And like, oh, it was so stupid. Definitely worth it. One of the hidden gems in Vegas. I want to play some 40-80 or 50-100 mixed. I mean, GUS. Oh yeah, Kings is a good hand. We've had a couple of those today. That's nice. I think the shove with A6 is very good though. I'm hoping that we have more like this. These are some spots that will definitely help us to correct our EV situation. Kill is if you scoop a pot above a certain amount, the blinds get juiced. That is pretty cool. I mean, if I feel like games like that need more of those sort of prop games. Otherwise, you're just doing the same thing way too much. E-Turn says, I have a weird question about GTO. Say villain jams 50x pot on the river, which is insane, but you can't fold 100% of your range, so GTO chooses a small percentage of range to call. What if he only has the nuts and does this only once? Where do you compensate GTO claim unexploitability? So him deviating, you should get compensated. Well, you're confusing two different issues. If you know that he only ever does it with the nuts 100% of the time, then the GTO output is to always fold. Now, GTO is not a static thing in real life, right? In the real world, people who play, they could have a strategy where they always have the nuts, and then all of a sudden they start doing it 1% of the time where they have a bluff, and that makes it a very good bluff. But you're making yourself incredibly broken if you do that with the nuts 99% of the time, and you're not going to win enough in those situations. So if GTO is unexploitable, it's not unexploitable because it's always the perfect system in every single situation. It's unexploitable against the specific range that you're playing against the specific strategy that is predefined. This is a common misconception. So I know that you're just creating a theoretical, like a hypothetical, in order to sort of like discuss the point. So I totally understand. But like, I had a great conversation once with David Doherty, who I really respect. I think he's a great guy. I think he's a really good poker player. And he said something along the lines of, I don't want to misquote him, but like everything is GTO if you have the right input, or everything is GTO, you know, with the right node lock. And he's not saying that everything is GTO. What he's saying is that you can pretty much justify anything being GTO, assuming you know exactly what your opponent is doing. And that's what we're trying to accomplish with GTO. Now, it just so happens that baseline GTO, so just normal GTO, is assuming that both opponents have had an opportunity to adjust perfectly to each other's strategies, and therefore they're finding equilibrium by playing perfectly against each other on that basis, right? So they've solved for the pre-flop, they worked out what the best pre-flop would be, then assuming those ranges, they've worked out the flop, and then assuming that range, they've worked out the turn, and so on and so forth. So in your example, if you know that he does that 100% of the time, that doesn't make you exploitable. It just means that your opponent is playing his hand like a dumbass, and he's never going to get paid when he has the nuts, right? So in a way, his deviation from GTO is exploiting himself, because what he's doing is getting you all the keys to the castle. Every time he's all in with the best hand, you know that he always has the best hand. You can always fold. Now you could say, well, what if he deviates now? What if he did it with the nuts and now he's going to do it when he's bluffing some of the time? Well, that's fine too, but it's still so unbalanced that it's so negative EV for him to do that it's not of value anymore. Because we can assume that even if he adjusts by 5%, he's only going to be able to bluff 5% of the time, but he's never getting enough value when he has the best hand, which is very important. It's more important that we get paid when we have the best hand for a large amount than it is for us to be able to exploit our opponent for 5% where we can just fold for 50x pot or whatever, right? But, you know, people will play differently on different days. That's, you know, GTO isn't a perfect game-breaking, if you're perfect GTO, you never lose. You just have to go with, you know, what you believe. Am I going to run to the guy that reads newspaper? I mean, to be fair, Vegas in general is not like that, Tom. I mean, you know, Vegas tends to be a lot more chatty and a lot more social. So that was more of like a middle of the day Wednesday London situation for sure. Nick has a good story about that one. Yeah, this is a good story. Sorry, Etern says, no, I mean, I don't know this, but what if that's the case? GTO should prepare for any deviation. No, but that's the point. GTO can prepare for that deviation. This is where I think you're misunderstanding. GTO can prepare for any situation, but that doesn't mean that baseline GTO is prepared for that situation, because they can't prepare for a situation that doesn't exist in the inputs that you provide it. So what I mean to say by that is, if we know that that's true, or if we know that that's sometimes true, even if we think that's true 90% of the time, right? If you give GTO that input, it will give you an output that will correctly respond to that, mathematically speaking. Now, the other issue that you encounter, however, is if you just say to GTO, when you have the nuts, you're going to do this, you can force it to do that. It's called node locking, right? The way the GTO does it will be the most logical way possible, but the way that your opponent does it might be completely illogical. So the GTO output in that case is also only going to have to take its best guess. But this is the nature of the game of poker. It's not simple, and it's not checkers. There's not a limited number of moves that one can make. So with the knowledge that there is a near unlimited amount of options that you have, especially when you're playing deep stack cash poker, for example, the best we can do is to try and identify the style of our opponent's play, get as much information as possible about the hands they show down when they're betting 50x pot for this example, input that to the best of our ability into, you know, some kind of a calculator that will tell us how to respond, and then go from there. And then probably what you discover after seeing this guy shove 50x pot 10 times is that some of the time the guy has a bluff. And working out how much that is, you know, we can start to figure out how much of a strong range we need to call with, and what that looks like, and what hands benefit from being in that situation. We value bet the turn here, by the way, guys. That is the 9 of diamonds getting there against us. But I appreciate where you're coming from, because a lot of people assume that GTO is because a lot of GTO, it comes from solvers. The idea is that you've solved the equation. Like, I know how to play this spot 100% of the time absolutely perfectly. That is true if your opponent is playing close to a GTO strategy to begin with. But the important thing to remember, E-Turn, is if we, as players, before the game has been changed by our opponents, play close to GTO, we become, based on our actions, something nearing unexploitable, right? So by playing closer to GTO, when we are taking the initial action before our opponents have changed, this is very important. No, this is the mistake. This is the mistake. So if you guys are rewatching this, Etrin says, but baseline GTO strategy claims to reach at least break even against any possible strategy. No. Baseline GTO strategy claims to be unexploitable against another perfect GTO strategy. The Nash equilibrium exists where two players know each other's strategy. But this is where I was going, and I know it's difficult on delay, so I'm not. It's all good. But if we tailor our strategy, where we take action before our opponents have changed their strategy, what we are doing is going to get us to a game or a strategy that is very, very good against many different player types. However, it's absolutely imperative that we change for our opponents specifically. So the best advice that I can give, and I spoke a lot about this when I did my course for PokerStars Learn, was I did a chapter that was called GTO post-flop A strategy, or post-flop A method, or something like that. And the idea behind that one is to explain that GTO, where we are taking action, is almost always going to be a very good course of action until our opponents mess it up. So what does that mean? If we are playing heads up poker and we are 15 big blinds deep, playing the range that we have, the range that we are dealt in a fashion close to GTO is going to be a very good way to approach the game. It's going to be very solid. It's going to be very stable. It's usually going to give us a lot of advantages in a lot of ways. And the further that our opponent deviates from the way that they react to that puts them in worse situations. So they might deviate in a way that could theoretically exploit us if we're assuming that we should raise and fold with a certain range based on the pre-flop ranges. But it's not until our opponent messes it up that it becomes an issue. So, for example, pre-flop, I can raise Jack-10 suited and my opponent can 3-bet. And I can defend the 3-bet with Jack-10 suited. But the defense is predicated on knowing that your opponent 3-bets the correct frequency. If your opponent only ever 3-bets aces, how could the baseline strategy ever be perfect against that opponent, right? Because if we know for a fact your opponent only ever has the top 1% of his range, it can never be true that the strategy that is predicated on your opponent having the correct 3-betting frequency is going to show us the correct mathematical defense range, right? But that still doesn't mean that we're not becoming a better player against that player, right? So as soon as we get better at identifying our opponent's frequencies, it means that we know generally which direction to travel. So if I go to play a live cash game and we're playing low stakes and there's a bunch of old grumpy old men on that table, I can almost guarantee you that their 3-betting range is going to be like tiny. And you can just open and then fold to a 3-bet all day long. And some would say, well, doesn't that mean that you're exploitable? I mean, yeah, maybe to a certain degree, but we've correctly identified where the hinge is, where the breaking point is, right? So we've studied what the defense range, what the GTO defense range is if our opponent 3-bets at 20% frequency. Then we can study what our defense range is at 15% frequency. Then we can study at 10% frequency. So baseline GTO is baseline GTO because that's what it assumes everyone should be doing from pre-flop down to the river. As soon as there's a deviation, we need to do a complete different calculation, but that doesn't mean that GTO can't come to that conclusion with the correct inputs. Does that make sense? And also, thank you. Yeah, that's the whole point. GTO in its raw sense is basically impossible for a human to replicate it. And it's usually not intended for that either. So learning GTO is extremely beneficial because it is almost always the right thing, or a good thing. That's a better way to describe it. A good thing to do in circumstances where we haven't allowed our opponent to mess it up at some point. Because if I do some study today, we've got some hands for review that we can look over in just a moment, for example. I'm not always looking for tick, 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 tick. If I feel like it's a hand where I should be playing against an opponent who has the reasonable range, then the triple ticks, quadruple ticks might be great. But I'll also go on to say something like, we're definitely going to do a deviation here against this player for a specific reason, and that will be superior to the output in GTO. However, if you have, you know, the expensive version of GTO Wizard like I do, we can node lock situations and we can actually work out exactly what a strategy looks like against a more unbalanced opponent. In the extreme example that you provide, and I totally appreciate where you're coming from, and I don't mind talking about this. In that extreme example, what you have to remember is maybe this guy has developed a strategy, and there are players who have very wild deviation strategies that are very effective against certain player types, right? Maybe this guy has found a way to theoretically exploit us in the sense that his 50x pot strategy is not 100% the nuts, but it's only 90% the nuts. So he's exploiting us for the 10% that he's sneaking in there. Okay, fine. But the amount that he has lost by playing his hand so badly is going to be of more benefit to you than what you need to worry about losing. So it's not it's all a theory, you know, everything is theoretical. And what we're just trying to do is understand why the computer does what it does, understand the patterns of how we change against certain player types, and then just assume that the humanity within us is going to allow us to actually, you know, come close to whatever it is that the math wants us to do in the long term. So does GTO claim to reach at least break even against any possible strategy? It will do very well. It will do very, very well. In fact, theoretically, against the best possible strategy, it should break even. If we're looking at extremes, if we're looking at that extreme, the extreme in your example, there's a chance that that player might exploit you because it's not built into baseline GTO. But that opponent is already lost. So another way to say that is that player. Oops, I don't know. Nightbot just timed you out. That wasn't me, buddy. Sorry. That player has already owned himself so much by playing that strategy that you're already beating that player by a significant margin as played. Does that make sense? So is that player exploiting you? Maybe in really specific, awful situations that never turn up. But the fact that they have basically allowed you to fold a potential calling hand because they always go all in with the nuts, that usually means that you've already beat them. Like you already have edge because they've deviated so far. Okay, sorry. I'm going to try and follow up here. But if he 3-bets only better, doesn't it mean I get more equity realization with other hands because he doesn't 3-bet enough? So I get compensated from other nodes. Well, it depends. It depends what that looks like, and it depends if he has like a split frequency, right? It depends if he's merging the hands that he 3-bets. If your opponent 3-bets only aces and you're 600 big blinds deep, you can afford to always call because you know that if you make the nuts, he's never going to fold aces, and you stack him for $1 billion. So there's a lot of ins and outs. It's not as simple. It's not simple enough just to break that down. But sorry, the second part of what you're saying is true, right? So because he doesn't 3-bet enough, it means that the range that you play when they flat as opposed to 3-betting, you realize way more equity from that. So you do have a greater edge. So they exploit themselves by not playing a strategy closer to what you're expecting, 100%. Yeah, sorry, we didn't time you out, by the way, buddy. We didn't time you out. It was just Nightbot thinking you were repeating. So I guess long story short, there's some confusion surrounding what GTO truly is, but for the most part, if you have the right inputs, GTO will tell you what the answer is, right? If you know that your opponent only ever 50x pots the river with the nuts, then like you've already won. It's not even about him exploiting you, or it's not about always calling with the correct range. Your opponent is already lost because he's playing like a dum-dum, because he's never going to get paid enough when he actually has a good hand, right? But the second half of what you're saying is true. So again, if your opponent doesn't attack your opens often enough, they don't 3-bet enough, all of your weekends just see a flop all the time, and they improve as much as they want. They never put you in any bad situations pre-flop, and they never build the pot enough in order to stack you when they do get lucky and cold deck you. So, you know, again, that's further evidence as to why a deviation from GTO is actually more them owning themselves than it is them deviating in a way to try and exploit you. Wow, that was a bit of a rant, wasn't it, guys? Pro tip: nobody folds aces. There we go. All right, no, cool. King queen suited. Sorry for the rant, guys, but I think it's an interesting one that a lot of people ask about, and I think it's a really interesting point of conversation. And I think that the more that I've worked on it, the more I realize that there's just such inherent wisdom in the process of studying GTO, assuming that we are human enough to go, nobody does this. This is stupid. Like, I'm not going to do this. This is not a good strategy. Or assuming that people go, okay, I know that GTO says I should call at 10% of the range on the river, but this guy never bluffs on the river. And the best answer in that case, if you no luck that specific node, if your opponent does not have the exact perfect frequency of hands distributed all around the hands that they're supposed to have pre-flop, we can just go, this feels like a fold, and it's a fold, you know? Nice, straight into a winner. All right, let's play for like another 15 minutes, guys. Then we'll do some quick review of the hands we have marked. We can actually each, and if you stick around, buddy, we'll take a look at some examples from GTO Wizard. This chair is not going to be as squeaky as this in future as well, guys. I'll take a look at some examples, and we'll do some node locking so you can see kind of what I'm getting at. I'm not sure how much of that you've done before, by the way. So I'm kind of just going to assume that, you know, you might have done a little bit, but most people have not gone that one extra step. Computer says maybe. Can't fold flop. Queen. What is that deuce? We can still bluff on a later street as well here, guys. The jack might be good enough. The jack legitimately might be good enough. Nice. We get called by pocket tens. Lovely. Beautiful, beautiful outcome. I'd be interested to see what the bluff size is meant to be on that river, right? Like, I think we actually are allowed to bluff at that same small size just because we can get some ace highs to fold, a fair whack. Maybe some queen highs. And pocket eights, let's just go for a straight 2.5. We're going to call a shove here if we need to. Love this crazy left says, I enjoyed the rant explanation. Is very interesting. I'm not watching the football, Martin. I didn't see it. I think somebody across the street might be, though. I can't. I feel like it looks like they're watching football. Players deviating and owning themselves is a cool aspect to the game. I mean, this is like... that's the bit that actually really, really interests me, because for a long time, to be good at poker, all you had to know is that some cards played better and some cards played worse. And if you just even had the semblance of an idea that you should maybe just fold bad hands to start and you should play better hands, that would just mathematically make you better. Like, that's all the GTO you needed. Like, at a time before solvers, you could just be better at checkers or chess just by knowing what a good start was, right? And the same goes for poker. Just like any chess or checkers open, if you just know what looks like a better move, you're gonna do way better than people that play any two cards, right? It's just straight math. The same is true for the modern game, except it's just miles more complicated now. So Etern says, so my idea was wrong all this time. I always thought GTO baseline would assure me reaching break even in the overall EV of 100,000 spots, not a specific group spot. So the issue that you have, May, is that you've picked a really specific and an extreme example. Generally speaking, if you played perfect GTO, baseline GTO, you're going to do great against most people. Like that, like what you're saying is kind of true, but we can't pick out extreme examples like that and assume that the correct answer is going to exist, because GTO will basically always, we can look at a spot, but part of the problem is that it doesn't exist. So here's a really good example. When I made the NickWalshTV chart pack, it is a GTO chart pack. It's designed to be GTO. It's designed to be baseline GTO, right? Players contacted me to say, Nick, I'm playing this hand, but I can't find this spot. So what's going on? I think you might have forgotten to put stuff in. What they didn't understand was GTO doesn't solve for something it doesn't consider to exist in the timeline. If you don't force it to, or give it an option that it chooses, it will not do that pre-flop. So, for example, GTO, this isn't strictly true, this is mostly true. For the most part, GTO never limps the button three-handed and spin and goes. If you give it the option, it'll do it a little bit, because it thinks there's probably some interesting spots it can do, but that's just whatever. It's a computer being a computer, right? If you assume that you always min-raise or fold the button, that means when the button limps according to that solve, there are no moves for the small blind to make, because that initial move doesn't exist in the timeline. So in your example, where the guy is on the river and he shoves 50x pot, there isn't a solution for that unless you force the guy to do that 100% of the time with the hands that you choose to give him. And that's not something that exists in nature. So it's not that GTO didn't have an answer for that question. It's just a question that didn't exist in its mind, because it would assume nobody would play so stupid in the first place. And the reason it's solved like that is because it would never assume your opponent would play so badly in the first place to worry about that happening, right? So that doesn't mean that you can't tell the computer to do it and force the computer to do it some of the time, but you're creating the answer, or you're creating a question that doesn't exist in the computer's mind. Does that make sense? So that is a really good example of, we can find an answer to that question potentially, but it probably just isn't a thing in the first place. We'll mark this one for review. I'm almost positive that we have to call for three big blinds. Just too much equity. Against a reg, we're going to actually have the best hand there quite a lot, like a lot more than you'd think. Let's simplify this one. We'll mark that one for review in the call. So it's not so much that baseline GTO has the answer to every possible... Baseline GTO does not solve for every opponent type. It just solves for really good against most people. And really, it's not good enough, to be honest. GTO is not good enough, because when you start to play well against players of a specific style, wow, that's a good flop. That's a good turn. That's a good river. When you start to get good at identifying player types and the way that they play, the exploit is worth so much more. You make way more that way. You make so much more. Once you've identified that the old guy shoving the river for 50x always has the nuts, you're not really winning that much more, because it's so stupid it's not going to win him any money in the first place. And if he's not winning money, you're not losing money, because poker is almost a zero-sum game, right? So if the guy sat opposite you, if you're playing a game with absolutely no rake, if the guy opposite you plays so bad that he never wins when he has a good hand, you're winning by default. You don't have to adjust for that player type necessarily, even though obviously the obvious response is to just fold when he's all in, right? Cow says, I think the Jack-10 might be a check on that board. Allows for a lot of value owning and bluffing from your opponent's range. You got paid there, but I'm not sure 10s don't value own themselves. Potentially. I definitely don't hate what you're saying, mate. I think there's a lot of wisdom to that. I think, generally speaking, I do tend to overbet those kinds of river spots. I think you might be right. Right, this last spot was 6.67 big blinds. I think that was a bit too wide. I think I'm supposed to shove 10-7 and I'm supposed to call 10-6. We'll mark that one for review. I think I got that one wrong. So going back to my initial point, so much of modern GTO sounds very complicated and sounds fancy, and we use big words and it's all blah, 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 whatever. It doesn't matter. But basically the same concepts are being applied to just having a good pre-flop strategy, right? So back in the day before solvers, just having a good pre-flop strategy made you mathematically better. But in the same way, players who go, I don't believe in GTO, the further that you deviate from it, almost always, unless you're doing it specifically to target the tendencies of your opponents, right? The further that you deviate from GTO, almost always the worse that you do, just because you're playing hands not as well as your opponents, basically. What is this run out, guys? First of all, how does he have queens when he's short stacked twice? And then when we finally get lucky with ace queen, we turn the straight and river a chop? What in the actual fuck? We are running so bad this year, guys. It's actually hilarious. I was conditioned to expect the fourth club on that river to give the king queen. I mean, that's where I'm at, mate. That's where I'm at. That's where I'm living right now. That's the hell that I'm living in right now. Oh, nice. This is a late game cooler going our way. This feels good. Where was the club? Where was the club? All right, let's play one more game and then we'll do a quick review, guys. I don't recognize the player on the right. It's an interesting topic anyway. Sorry for those of you who weren't interested in the rant. But I think that this is, I think the conversation we're having today, which, like, again, I feel good about having anyway. The conversation we're having today, one of the biggest issues I think that people have with GTO is that somebody told them one time that GTO is like a perfect strategy. It's a really, really, really good strategy. It's very, very good. It's not perfect against every player type, and I think that they got turned off because they saw a solver output once and they were like, this is ridiculous. This would never work in my cash game. And you're like, yeah, absolutely. But this is also baseline GTO, and whatever works in your cash game is not going to look anything like the pre-flop that we're looking at here. Let's just go again. Let's go again here. Let's go again. That's cool. We'll make a little note about the limp with eights, but we're still going to be in flip territory here, which we lose, of course, because we're not allowed to have nice things this year. We will make a little note of this one. We're not going to write him off as a crazy person yet, because that's fine. I don't think getting eights in is crazy. But the limp is unconventional. Multi-way 15 effective was 88 trap, question mark. I would usually lean towards this guy is not a limp deviation trap expert like Texas Tomo, and probably just doesn't know what to do with eights, so decided that he was going to limp and call a jam. But if you're going to limp eights, the call is correct. That felt like you just won a WSOP main event. Maybe not the main. Let's take a look at our graph so far today, guys. We'll do some reviews. So filter for today specifically. So this is where we're at the end of today's very short session. This wasn't that many games. We ended up sort of flatlining. This flatline EV thing we're doing right now is just nonstop. We actually had a fair number of good opportunities to win some decent multipliers today, guys, but we're just not on the right side of what's going on right now. We ended up actually being up in chips, which is a nice treat. We've kind of not been particularly lucky in that regard. We ended up winning $50 overall in 19 games, 75 in 18 games, excuse me. That must have been the wrong one. So not too bad. Made a couple bucks. Happy days. That's okay. This is whatever. If we actually look at our long-term graph, though, guys, we're just not winning enough in EV. Our showdown is completely flat for some reason. We've been on a very protracted run of getting something going and then not getting to showdown enough with the best hand. And I think for the most part, we're playing relatively solid poker. So we need to kind of break free from this flatness. But little run like this, if we could get this run there to look like that to that, suddenly we're winning 12 chips a game. Do it again, we're looking at like 14. Those little runs actually make a big difference to our overall chip EV. Like I said, I think we're currently at like 7 or 8 or something like that, and we need to do better. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and do some review hands. So at this stage, guys, if you're new, I am going to close Poker Stars because we're about to use some technology, and that technology is not for use while we are playing. So just to be ultra safe, as you guys know, it's just not even worth having this stuff on. Just to be ultra safe, we are going to close everything down so it's absolutely clear that we are studying now and we're not playing. So first things first, there's a fold, there's a shove, blind to be blind. We have king deuce off. This guy is a reg. We have him labeled now as well today, as of today. So just for the sake of expediency, I am going to use GTO Wizard upload feature. I particularly like to use this because, especially when we're playing this close to a session, the GTO Wizard backend knows that I'm uploading hands that have been played in the past rather than me accessing hands in real time, which is not really useful, to be honest. If you're having to do that in real time, you're not gonna do well in this player pool anyway. So yeah, 100% call, pretty straightforward stuff. It's, in my opinion, this is obviously very straightforward. I like to double check these ones that are on the sort of weaker end just in case I'm missing anything. So 10-9 suited, I limp. And we are starting the hand around 7.5 big blinds effective. Our opponent shoves. We definitely can't fold a hand like 10-9 suited. We have too much equity. The only reason I'm looking this one up is because I believe it might be that 10-9 suited is a limp at 8, and then it is a shove at 7. But I'm pretty sure I get this one right. If we'll look at both, and I'll double check my work here, basically. Yeah. So absolutely spot on correct. Let's take a look at the two ranges anyway, for the sake of study. So this is at 7.5. Strategy is here. So we are looking at call. And then of course, this is going to be well inside of a call for EV. So once we see the all in from our opponent here in the big blind, you can see we're calling as wide as queen 8 suited, jack 8 suited, queen 6 suited. So this is going to be very good, especially against another reg. For the sake of completeness, let's take a look at 7. 7 is still in there, and 8 of course will still be in there as well as a limp. Perfect, good stuff. This is spot on against the reg. Queen jack, all in for 11.9. So this is one that I picked out because I wanted to look at the differentiation in EV. Shoving queen jack here will be profitable 100% of the time against any opponent type. This will be good. The more likely your opponent is to fold, the more profitable this becomes, because when we get called, we almost never have the best hand. But if your opponent folds king deuce here or king 5 here, or what, those are bad examples maybe. If your opponent folds king 8 suited or something like that, all of a sudden this becomes very, very good. So let's take a look at the solve. I'm pretty sure that GTO will deviate from shove. I think they'll play this as a limp, but the shove is going to be completely fine as well. And yeah, it turns out this is actually the most frequently played line with this specific combo. So instincts are correct here. Happy days. And 5-4 off. So there's a limp. This is at around 12 big blinds effective. There's a check. We have this gut shot spot with the backdoor ace deuce gut shot on the turn. So I'm almost positive that this is a combination we check raise at a very high frequency, especially on rainbow. Our opponent will bet this very often. Ace 8-6, very often a bet here at the stacked up. Check raise. I think the 8 is a particularly bad turn card for us to barrel. So we're going to take a look at what GTO has to say here, in the knowledge that we're not experts at the turn here. Yep, so approved. Let's take a look at where we might do something differently. So pre-flop check almost all the time. We know that this is a raise some of the time. That's good. We are never playing this as a jam, which is funny because we're allowed to do that about 10% of the time. And once we arrive here, there is a bet. Now the check raise is going to happen often. You guys can see that the call is absolutely mandatory. Never folding is important here. The check raise is part of a strategy. I like to always attack these gut shot type spots. The reason why this doesn't happen more frequently is because we are not going to believably represent an ace as often. So we'll look at that in a second. But if we remember, we're supposed to check raise this combo theoretically 9.2% of the time. Obviously, you know, we're just making a decision in the moment. If we run this and the board is queen high, I think we end up check raising this more often. That's my guess. So first of all, let's study that. Let's take a look at that. So let's assume now the board comes rainbow, but it's going to come the queen of spades instead of the ace. And we take a look at everything that happened. What happens with the 5-4 offsuit is the check raise happens similar amount. So this is 9.2. The check raise happens 10.8. So, you know, depending on what size you choose to use. So the check raise to 4 happens at 20% here now. The check raise to 4 happens 6.3% of the time here now. So the thought process is generally correct. What they're doing is they're deviating, or they're distributing the number of raises across the different sizes. So if instead we were to solve this, let's duplicate this one. Let's say that we go back to the ace of spades here, so we have the exact right hand. And this is the check raise that we have right now. So this is what we looked at just now. That's pretty close, right? If we change this to, if we have this one as the queen, and we change this to be a single size strategy, this is usually a great indicator of whether or not we're thinking about this the right way. So on both occasions, we've simplified this now. Instead of having raised to 2, raised to 2.5, raised to 3, raised to 4, whatever, we're now only raising to either call or 3.6. The frequency at which we raise to 3.6 with 5-4 off is now 8.5%, right? So that's the total number of raise. If we now go across to this simple version where we've made it single size and we go down to 5-4, the amount that we check raise is now 7.5. The issue is that we're using this 3.6 size as the simplified option. So given the option to use larger sizes overall, we will actually do this a fair whack, but that's because there is a very different output when we have the 3.6 sizing as opposed to using 2.5 or something like that, where we can get away with it more often. As a general rule, if you can bluff for less, it needs to be less effective in order to be profitable. That's why learning what a dry flop is and trying to understand the pain points of where we can bet small effectively as a bluff is so good in the game of Texas Hold'em. So by forcing the computer to give us one size that is just going to be 3.6, which is probably going to be better for hands like Queen 10, for example, right? It might be that this is a great size for this, but now all of a sudden these combinations suffer in that department because we're being forced to use that one size. Whereas if we go back to general or simple, perhaps, simple might be a good example, we can see we do it way more often, right? Because using this 4x size, 26.4% of the time, this allows this combination to be more effective as a check raise. Interesting that the 4 exists. This isn't a size that I would have expected at all, but when we actually drill down into this, you can see how much more we're allowed to do this depending on the frequency and the size that we use, and that all plays into it. This is another great example. So E-Turn is still in the chat. This is another great example of why what we were discussing earlier is so frequently confused. So if we solve for a GTO, we need to tell the computer what we think is a thing, right? Now, there's a way that we can do this where we go, we're brand new to poker. I don't know what a check raise size is supposed to look like. I have no idea. What you can do is you can say, go away and solve it. I want you to test check raise to 2 big blinds, check raise to 3 big blinds, check raise to 4 big blinds, check raise to 5 big blinds. And it will do it. It will include those sizes if it thinks it's a thing. And if it doesn't think it's a thing, it won't do it. That is a GTO output. That is baseline GTO. But it doesn't have to be. Baseline GTO can be you saying to the computer, I want you to make it either a 2x check raise or a 5x check raise, and it will give you an output. And that is baseline GTO. But it is predicated on the input that you give it, which is usually an assumption that your opponent is playing the appropriate strategy that it's already gleaned, or and it's the appropriate strategy assuming you force the computer to use those sizes, which might be inappropriate. So when we look at this spot, the 5-4 check raise is absolutely a thing. We've confirmed that. We know that's good. It's actually the same EV as the call, but blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter, right? if we want to be aggressive in spots like this, we can look at this, and all of these things are GTO outputs, and they are all technically solved correctly. However, this is perhaps a good example of how people assume when they were told what GTO was, they were told that this is the only way to play poker, and all of these whiz kids have the secret. They have the solve. It's been solved. This game is solved, right? It's only solved as well as the inputs that you give it, which could be down to your personal experience and not down to actual, recorded mathematics or frequencies that your opponents have. And it's only as good as the reasonable assumptions that you provide the computer that they have for outputs. Now, the reason people play for GTO Wizard is because they have a lot of very good outputs that give you the right idea. But going back to that initial question of, this is a great way to consider it. Going back to that initial question of, yeah, but like it doesn't know what to do against a 50x pot shove river, right? Let's say that we go all the way to the river. Let me show you this. Let's go to general. So now we have 1, 2, 3, 4 sizes to check raise. So we have a lot of different options. We've given the computers a lot of leeway. Let's say that we call and the turn comes the 5 of spades, and then there's a bet. Sorry, whatever. It doesn't matter. This isn't my point. There's a check, and then there's a check. And now on the river, it comes the 3 of spades. The computer doesn't even have the option to 50x pot here. Now, this is a bad example because we're playing spins and we only started the hand with 15 big blinds, or 12 big blinds in this case. But I guarantee you that if we started this hand 100 big blinds deep, that the big blind options here would not exist, because the computer has already identified that if a player is using that size, they are already cooking themselves. They've already exploited themselves against you by not winning enough when they have a good hand, or even worse, bluffing 50x pot where you can have the nuts and you call. It's so bad in both directions, right? It's kind of like, I used to do commentary, and I used to say something where I would say, well, I know this is a bad move because you can't think of a good hand that you would do it with, right? What do I mean by that? If you have a strong hand and you were shoving 50x, it's stupid. If you have a weak hand and you're shoving 50x, it's stupid. Because if you get caught, it costs you way too much. And if you don't get called, you never get paid. So it's almost not important that GTO doesn't have the answer to that question, even though it could if you forced it. It's just important that you understand that once your opponent has deviated that far, it's very hard for them to exploit you in a way which is meaningful. So it's not even important. So each-turn follows up with, if I ask too many questions, you can tell me. No, I'm enjoying the conversation, mate. It's fine. I always wanted to understand this game better and better, and not a lot of people like answering answering this, especially streamers from my country. It's not a problem, buddy. I've enjoyed the conversation. I like talking about this stuff. I'm a nerd, so. And what's interesting is, I'm a nerd for this, but I'm still even learning myself. I'm definitely not a master of all this stuff. I've had some experience with it now, and I'm starting to learn, in my own way. But through discussion, we improve. Cool. That was a really interesting one. So Jack 5. Limp, check, and we arrive here. So like I said, on this board, betting Jack 5 is going to be a great strategy. Absolutely. We are supposed to check some of our worst jacks. That's my assumption. That's what we're going to check in a moment. Once we arrive on this river, I think that a thinking opponent like this is going to bluff aggressively on this turn. They probably will bluff a little bit less aggressively when it's an ace, so that's problematic. So therefore, I think once we arrive here and they shove, I do think this is a particularly good river to bluff. The anticipation is that we bet quite a few of our 10s on this flop as a semi-bluff as it is. The anticipation is that we probably bet most of our flush draws on this flop. That's not always true, but some of them definitely. And I think if your opponent has a lead bluff on this turn, this is not the worst river to shove as a bluff. But I think we probably are supposed to fold the river. According to GTO, against the reg, whatever GTO says is probably going to be close to the truth. Not always, but there we go. Some regs will bluff more aggressively. But I have been known to understand these situations pretty well. I do honestly believe that once we got to this river, having the 5 is relevant because the 5-6 straight is now less likely. Your opponents can basically turn any 8, any 6. They might have been bluffing with a 10, but a lot of times it'll just be any spade. It can be, it could just be like a hand like the 9 of spades turns their hand into a bluff. That's probably less likely. I just think that this hand makes a lot of sense, especially once we've checked the flop. So first of all, the check on the flop is what we want to do most of the time with the lower combo. We're not doing this necessarily because we're scared of a stronger hand, but we want to have some top pairs that we do check. You can see this happens about 50% of the time. Once we arrive on the turn, we can only ever call because we're trying to bait our opponents into bluffing more frequently. And as I said, the 8, I think, is a particularly good river bluff from our opponent. We have a decent price because he's shoving 5.3 into 6. So we've drilled it, right, guys? I know it feels weird, but a lot of these spots actually do end up being pretty reasonable, even though that's a close one. That's a close one. If we actually go back really quick, if it's still open, it's a call 100% of the time. We can see how razor thin it is, though, right? 0.06. So against anybody that's not a reg, you want to be extremely careful in this spot. But we've played thousands of hands being this guy. So we limp here. And there's a check, and we arrive here. Now, our opponent min check raises us, and this is very unusual from a humanistic standpoint. If our opponent had an ace, unlikely to check raise for fear of giving away the strength of their hand. If they had a 7, the same is true. The issue that you have is that GTO will find a way to make a check raise on this board because this is a very good board to check raise as a bluff, and that means you have to do it with 7, basically. So the check raise from the 7 is a thing. I'm almost certain that this will happen as a min check raise with most 7s. However, humans don't like to do this because it's too obvious in their brains. So a float, when we have a 8-6 wrapped around a 7, gives us a lot of opportunities because I believe that many players will min check raise this board, and I think it's good, but they will very often immediately give up. So we see the give up, we place a very small continuation bet, turn bet, and our opponent folds. Now, I would argue, if we wanted to be very, very, very clever, a better way to play this hand would have been to have check turn, and then we could bet the river when they check again. The reason for that is it is not unreasonable for us to bet call with a 7 and check the turn for deception, or bet call the flop and still have an ace, or queen high or king high. So the turn is actually a pretty decent turn for us in terms of we might bet this with queen 10 on the flop and still call with a queen as a check raise because we don't believe that he has a 7 or an ace, right? So as played here, we do take it away. I'd be interested to see what the output says here because this was more me playing a player and not playing the numbers necessarily, but this actually might run. There we go. So I wouldn't be surprised if the turn is meant to be check, is what I'm trying to say, watching it back now. The bet can never be bad, don't get me wrong, but once we arrive here, the check happens about 2% more of the time. The thing is, this is part of why I think the check on the turn is so good, right? Because once your opponent gives up on this turn, it's so hard for them to give up and then bluff again. If they check the turn and barrel the river, you might be really cooked because a lot of the time, your opponent will check raise this for 2 big blinds as a bluff, but on the river, they just are going to hate life. They're not going to enjoy what's going on there. Interestingly enough, let's take a look at the flop now. Let's go back to the flop. On the flop, as the player to act in position, I wouldn't be surprised if at 8 big blinds effective, we're supposed to check king high and queen high quite often, simply because they're going to be the best hand a lot, and we don't need to necessarily defend our hand from all that much. In addition to that, it's almost better to probably bet 8-6 and then call a check raise where we are getting better hands to fold. Like we can get jack high to fold in the flop, 10 high to fold in the flop, queen high to fold in the flop. There are a lot of high cards that we can get to fold immediately when we bet on this very dry board. So let's take a look at the check raise at the c-bet frequency, because it's my belief that we probably bet tons, but there's a fair amount of checking here. You can see if we are going to play this as check, it does come from hands like aces, which is the obvious flop boat. Queens actually loves checking here because we don't really get that many worse hands to call. We might get king high to call some of the time, which is why the bet is okay, but a lot of the kings would have been played aggressively here pre-flop. Queen 6 is a check, queen 5 is a check, queen 4. Again, this isn't 100% frequency. This is still low. Jack high wants to check, jack 6 checks, jack 8 checks, jack 9 checks. So there you go. High cards confirmed, decent candidates. but it's a7-7. So just betting is very good, right? Once we get check raised to 2, once we bet 1, so it's the right range. Bet 1, raise 2. We're still going to call a fair amount, I'd imagine. 58% calls here. That goes to show you how little respect we give to a check raise here on a7-7. So good. Instincts are very, very strong here. We're loving life. Jack Trey. So all in, we call with Jack Trey for 3.8 big blinds. I'm pretty sure this is just math. This one is somewhat sensitive. I don't want to say very, but somewhat sensitive to the fact your opponents will have the correct range. Jack 3 is a call for 3.9 big blinds, whatever it is. Because these are so short, a lot of it is just an equity challenge. It's not to do with range as much, but against very tight opponents, we can fold some of the weaker stuff. This one, I believe, is a mistake. This might be close. We can shove 10-7 here, but I think 10-6 is too wide. This might have been the hand that we saved that was the mistake pre. This just feels like a better hand played as a call, to be honest. So I think it's call flop. Yeah, just a call. Easy, good. So our instincts were right. We just acted in the moment, and that was wrong. But there you go. So another day in the books. We managed to put in some hours here, despite missing our earlier session. A couple follow-up questions, then we'll wrap there. Etern says, this is what I read the core claim. In a heads-up, zero-sum chip EV game, playing GTO guarantees you cannot lose EV against any opponent's strategy. Your opponent cannot gain EV against a GTO strategy. The idea is if your opponent deviates from GTO, they can only hurt themselves, not you. And from this statement, I started asking so many questions. That is mostly true. That is mostly true, Etern. The only reason that there's confusion here is if you simplify it to a heads-up game, this is a great way to do it. If you simplify this to a heads-up game, and it is zero-sum and there's no rake, it's not even important. Forget about the rake. That is basically true. However, and this is so important, if your opponent deviates sufficiently from GTO, there are certain circumstances, especially once you get further down the decision tree, where that deviation will make your strategy very bad. However, if you're playing a heads-up game, almost always you are going to have enough circumstances where GTO will be appropriate against most player types that statement is kind of sort of true. So it's so weighted heavily in mathematics that the statement is sort of mostly true. It's just that if you are going to the river and you're saying, how often am I supposed to call with bottom pair? And it says call 5%, you can almost guarantee that outside of a GTO environment where both players are playing very, very perfectly against each other, you can almost guarantee that at that point, the call becomes like minus EV. However, usually by the time you get to that stage in the hand, if you still call at that correct frequency perfectly, which nobody does, you probably will still do okay. You will probably still do just fine. I guess what's more important is, because I completely understand why people are tripped up or they start to have misconceptions about GTO. The important takeaway is it doesn't really matter. It's like if you went to a golf coach and you said, "Coach, I want to be the best golfer I can be," and he said, "Well, let me show you a couple moves and a couple tricks so I can make you a much better golfer." He might not make you into the best golfer in the world. However, if you generally apply the strategies that he's provided you, and if you generally approach the game in that manner, you're going to do pretty well. It's a bit of a weird comparison because golf isn't a zero-sum game, right? So it's not like if your opponent plays worse, you inherently win more. I suppose that is sort of true, but you get where I'm going. It's you can go play golf on your own, and your own success can be your own as well. But in most of that statement is true, and for the most part, if you do adhere to a strategy that is close to GTO, almost all of that will remain true. The only thing I warn against is the further you get down the decision tree and the more your opponents can mess up, as in not play well, that will put you in more and more situations where the desired outcome or the desired action against that opponent will become bad. So if you're heads up and you're playing perfect chippy V, heads up, zero sum GTO poker against somebody who doesn't, you'll probably beat them by a long margin, like a very good margin. And that's mostly to do with their mistakes and not to do with your triumphs. However, if you know that somebody is not shoving Nash, if they get to 5 big blinds and they're not shoving whatever the correct frequency is, I mean, we can look it up if you want. Let's say that we get to heads up. And we're playing heads up and we're at 5 big blinds effective. This is the strategy, okay? Let's actually do this now. Your opponent is supposed to shove 71.5% of the time. Let's duplicate this. Let's get rid of all this. Let's just get rid of all the noise. Let's make this as simple as possible. If your opponent is 5 big blinds effective and this is their small blind and they are first to act, this is how they're supposed to behave. These are all ins. They shove or they fold. That's it. Simple. If we create a custom solution over here and we solve for 5 big blinds, pre-flop, 2 players, pure chippy V, we're 5 big blinds deep, 2 players, no limps, fold all in, that's it, solve. So ignore the black ones. This is a bug. These are also shoves, right? This and this are the same thing, okay? They look slightly different because it's weird and annoying that it does that. I'm not sure why, but I wish I knew how to fix that because that's going to tilt me now. Don't show me this. Overview. Why is it a different shape? That's so annoying. Oh, that's really annoying. Okay, doesn't matter. It's the same thing. Okay, so we've pretty much created the same thing. It's close. 71, 71.8, whatever, fine. Now, in this one, this is the one that we're going to mess with. In the event that your opponent shoves for 5 big blinds, this is the correct calling range. If you follow this rule and your opponent is shoving this range, the best case outcome for your opponent is breaking even. The best case outcome for you is breaking even. So you can only ever break even against this guy, right? You're going to call, you're going to have the best hand, you're going to call, you don't have the worst hand, but you're always going to follow this rule. If you always play this simplified GTO game, that is true. Your statement is true. But if you know that your opponent has deviated his strategy, it's not that GTO is insufficient to provide you with the correct answer. It's that the inputs are not true to reality. However, if you still continue to follow this strategy, you're still probably going to do quite well because most people, it's not that they aren't going to, it's not that you're going to call too wide and you're going to have the worst hand too often. It's very often that they're not going to shove enough and you're going to be able to realize more equity. So you pick it up in other ways. So let's say that we're in this situation and we're going to change this now. So we're going to node lock. If you guys don't know what node locking is, we're basically forcing the computer to have a strategy that is not baseline GTO. So now let's say that our opponent is now going to, don't do that. Let's do like this. Let's say that our opponent is now going to overfold, right? So they don't shove 5-3 suited or 4-3 suited or any of these, right? They don't know that you can shove any of these hands because when they were taught how to play Texas Hold'em, they were told you got to have a good starting hand. Oh, don't do that one. Undo that one. Here we go. You got to have a good starting hand. You can't be in here playing all loosey-goosey eating a sandwich, all right? You got to play with good, strong cards. You got to have at least Queen 8 suited or better. That's the rule in my house. Okay? And if you're sat across from a guy who's saying, oh, I play tight, tight is right, that's the way that I approach the game. Let's say that somebody is shoving this range now. Let's make sure we do this right. Okay, so lock is on. We're going to say lock all previous nodes as well, and we're going to apply. So this is the new strategy. Now, because we're playing a simplified game, if we assume this player is going to go all in with this much tighter range, the range that we have to call with has to be tighter. But it's not that baseline GTO has let us down. It's simply that the solution is different because the input is completely alternative. And the reason why this is such an important example that I'm trying to bring on is because for the most part, when we are doing stuff proactively, GTO is really, really good. But when we're reacting to the way that players play, humanity messes it up. The math just isn't there anymore. So it is our job to find how to not exploit, but adjust for the way that our opponents have deviated in the first place. Now, what's interesting about this is people don't break like this. They don't do this correctly. So if you look at the value of, let's compare some EV. Let's compare the best action. Let's compare all in versus, in fact, let's do it a different way. Let's do strategy and EV. If we look at this hand, for example, our opponent can shove this hand and they will profit 0.67 big blinds. That is massive. We are 5 big blinds effective. That is like a huge amount of big blinds relative to the amount that you risk. Your opponent is giving you so much because they're not taking from you in this situation that even if you continue to call with this range, you're still probably going to do pretty well because your opponents will actually be giving you the big blinds when they're overfolding from that position anyway. I don't know where the tipping point is. Of course, there's always going to be a tipping point in these things, but this is a particularly interesting spot because we know for a fact that this is going to make you, this strategy is going to make you 0.64 if you shove. It's going to make you 0.67 if you shove. It prints if you shove, and if they're missing those shoves, that is where the zero-sum game comes back to you by default. Heads up poker, they're missing the spots. But if you were to continue to call with this range, you probably don't lose all that much. So now let's take a look at this instead. Let's go back. Let's assume that we've no-locked this. Our opponent is shoved and this is our new strategy. The amount that we lose when we called with this hand is not that much. I mean, it's not at all. It's 0 and 0. The difference between call and fold with the hand is 0. Suddenly, this call is slightly losing. 0.12. That's still quite a lot. So there is a tipping point, and obviously some of these cards are just not very good against our opponent's much tighter range. So you will lose a little bit, but the whole nature of the mathematics behind this mean that we're going to minimize what we lose, assuming that our opponent isn't a dum-dum. If they are a dum-dum, let them be a dum-dum and realize that their mistakes will make you more than your mistakes against them, assuming that you follow a GTO strategy. That's where we're going with this. And with that, chat, we've managed to talk for 2 hours and 30 minutes, and I'm gonna sign off there. Thank you very much for your time, guys, and I apologize if there was a lot more ranting during this one, but I do think it's interesting. I like talking about it. I like discussing it with you guys because I learned something myself. E-Turn, thank you for joining the stream. Thank you for your questions today. I always welcome questions like that, and I hope that the discussion was of use. I'm going to stream tomorrow, probably during the day, 2 p.m. I might even do an evening stream tomorrow, potentially. I don't know. Today's action was not great. It is Monday evening, so it's not exactly peak time necessarily for us to find the best games. But we have played more poker, and that's the idea. We want to try and play 10,000 at $25 spinning goes this year, and we're going to try and hit that target if we can. I'm going to sign off for tonight, guys. I love you all very much, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.